Hi, this is Coach Joe Lucas, and welcome to the Magellan Network Show. My goal inside of this communication, this show, is to share with you my nearly 30 years of coaching some of the most successful financial advisors in North America. We're going to be talking about strategies, syntaxes. We're going to be bringing guests on from time to time, and I'm going to share with you what's working now. So think of this show as sort of like a little one-on-one kind of mini coaching cast, if you like, where we're going to be going in depth from time to time on strategies to help you grow your business, get more effective, become more efficient, find balance in your time management, grow your business, and quite frankly, whatever else is going on in the world today. So before we get to today's episode, I'd love for you to do a couple things for me. Number one, make sure that if you're watching this on YouTube, that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're doing the audio, make sure that you give us a review on whether it's Spotify or Apple. We'd really appreciate that. And quite frankly, that does help. It does matter when you rate things and like things and subscribe to things. It helps us get the word out to more of the industry. And lastly, I have a very special gift for you. Go to MagellanNetwork.net, so one word, MagellanNetwork.net, and I have for you a complimentary membership, 100% gratis, where you can tap into about between 50 and 75 hours of masterclasses, forms, tools, templates, and strategies. So please go ahead and make sure you go ahead and get that claimed. Smash the like button and subscribe. And please go ahead and leave us a review on whatever podcasting platform you're on. And now, let's get to this week's episode.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Elzweig, president of Mark Elzweig Company, executive recruiters. And we've been working with wirehouse, regional, and independent advisors for 40 years. This is our beginning of our 40th year. We've been helping them. We've often thought, I think about it all the time. How can I do a lot more business than I've been doing? How do I really ramp things up? And sometimes people think, well, I'm just going to do more of what I've been doing. More phone calls, more meetings, more LinkedIn. That's the answer. But that's not necessarily true. And sometimes it's very helpful to have an experienced and knowledgeable sales coach look at what we're doing and help us decide if that in fact is the right strategy. So this afternoon, that's why I'm especially delighted to have Joe Lucas with us. He has 30 years experience working with financial advisors, working with financial advisory firms. If you go to his website, you'll see he has a lot of passionate endorsements from many of the people that he's helped over the years. So thank you for being here, Joe, and I'm really excited to get our conversation underway.
Mark, I'm excited to have the conversation. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking at some of our attendees, and I'm like going, okay, I know a lot of these names. So I want to also acknowledge, Joe and Chris and Curtis and Darren, a lot of the guys I've known for many, many years to take the time out of their busy day to join us inside this conversation.
So thank you, Joe. So let's jump in. I guess my first question is, how did you ever become a financial advisor coach? I doubt that in high school or college that was a dream of yours. How did that come about that you became a coach to financial advisors?
Well, after I finished my MBA in Harvard, then went for Stanford for my PhD in like crazy things, which is not true actually. So, everything in life, there's the plan of life and then what life gives you, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I would love to tell you it was like one of those very well thought out stories and very intentional. And the
Mm-hmm.
reality is it was the exact opposite of intentional. It was just totally happenstance. I went to work for Tony Robbins back in the very early 90s, 1992 to be exact. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time I lived in New Jersey. And if everybody knows geography, what's right next to New Jersey? Manhattan, right? They needed somebody to cover lower Manhattan. What do I know? I said, yeah, I'll raise my hand. And I took the train in, Lilly into World Trade Center at the time. And my world was very much like a wholesaler world where we sold and a lot of people don't realize this. Tony Robbins, while it's all about, personal power and the big teeth and the infomercials and the firewalk and all that other jazz, there was a whole nother division of his company, Robbins Research International, that did corporate training. So that's the
Mm,
side I was on. So we
mm-hmm,
used to sell sales training and influence training back then to the stockbroker world, quite frankly. And we
mm-hmm,
sold personal development programs to the stockbroker world. So it was just basically I was there. If I lived in San Francisco, I probably would be
mm-hmm,
doing tech companies, right? Or
mm-hmm,
anything like that. So it's just one of those things where that's how I really got my exposure to. I like to call it the predecessor industry because that world
mm,
does not exist anymore today in our space, obviously, for the most part. And I just found it to be a real passion of mine. And I think what really drove me to really want to specialize with advisors, and there's a lot of, I mean, you can coach anything really, is that it's tangible, right? So, like if I was
mm-hmm,
coaching a middle manager at Walmart, maybe they make an extra bonus, maybe they don't. It's not going to change their world. But when I can work with
mm-hmm.
an advisor and they're doing $300,000 of production, and then 10 years later, we're doing $3 million of production, that's going to change somebody's life, right?
Right,
So
right.
that's why I love this game because it's tangible, it's measurable, and you can't BS it. The results are there or they're not there, period.
And also, it gives you the opportunity to be a high impact player, right?
Correct.
Really make an impact in someone's life. When you take
Hmm.
them from 300,000, to a million or whatever, you dramatically change their lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's my jam. I like that.
How did you get to the title? I mean, the title of our webinar, basically, how do you double your income if you're a financial advisor? It's
Yeah.
not what you think. How did
Yeah.
that come about?
I was asked to do a talk earlier this year for a group, and I'm always thinking like, okay, the last thing I want to do is something that's been done over and over again. And I really started to think, and it was a good time of year because the end of the year, I just gotten done with business planning for my clients. And I think some of you guys were actually part of that live stream who are here today.
Mm,
I stumbled upon a lot of interesting distinctions over the last couple of years, which is basically, I think the industry a lot of times thinks that certain things need to be in place in order to really grow your game. And I think a lot of times we end up putting a lot of energy into things that may or may not yield us results while
hmm
ignoring the things that I know to be true. So I wanted to talk, and this is going back to the other conversation, which we'll do here. A
hmm
lot of advisors think in order to continue to grow their game, it's about doing more.
hmm
I'm going to get up earlier. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to make more calls. I'm going to ask for more referrals. And I'm not going to be dismissive of those, but it's not the main thing, and this is where our industry kind of preys on advisors, like, on the marketing side and on the business development side. If it was as simple as, and this is an example I like to use about names, if
hmm
tripling your business was as simple as these two things, go bring in a practice management system, stroke the check, hire the consultant or coach, install that, and go get a marketing system, stroke the check, hire the entity, run the program. If that's all it would take to triple your
hmm
business, everybody would do it.
Right.
Everybody would do it. And yet we all know, in fact, some of you guys here today know that's just not true. That, you can bring in all the systems you want and all the social media and all the other things. And I'm not saying it won't move the needle. I'm not going to say it won't do anything.
hmm
It's not going to give you that breakout.
Right.
And because if it was the case, everybody would just stroke a check and everybody would be super successful, right? And we just know that's not true.
Right.
So so there has to be more to the story than that, right? And that's really what we're here to discuss today, which is, well, what is the story? When you really boil it down, what does it take? And that's why we put it's not what you think. It's not about doing more. It's not about working
hmm
harder. It's not about
hmm
bringing in more systems or another silver bullet to solve a problem. Everybody's business is a reflection of who they are. And this is not the fun conversation, right? Because
hmm
at the end of the day, your current bank account is 100% a byproduct of your past psychology, identity, and mindset. So if you want your future bank account to be greater, i.e., double, right?
hmm
It's not going to be found in more systems and more silver bullets. It's you have to evolve as a human being. And
Right.
this is what kind of the framework that I've put around it now, where every one of my intro conversations. So an
Mm-hmm.
advisor comes into my world, and usually by referral, and
Mm-hmm.
oh, so tell me a little about your business, stuff like that, right? And I say, oh, I'm doing about half a million, $1 million. Like, great. Well, so let's say $1 million. Well, hey, tell me where you want to be in 3 to 5 years. Well, I want to be doing 2.5 to $3 million. That's okay, great. Well, I know what the $1 million version of you looks like. That person's right in front of me right now. What does the $3 million version of you need to look like? Because as soon as we can unlock that, then that $3 million will become a reality for you. And that's why it's not what you think it is, right? At the
Right.
end of the day, and like I said, I know some of the guys here, so it's kind of a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark, you've been at this game a long time too, so it's a really good thing to do. If we all were
Mm-hmm.
to jump back in time to, let's say, 2025, so 2015, 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
are you the same person professionally you were 10 years ago?
Of course not.
You've evolved, right? We all have,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. So what we're saying here is evolution happens no matter what. What
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying is instead of making it happenstance
Mm-hmm.
and subject to, what would happen if we could intentionally control that evolution
Mm-hmm.
that gives us the opportunity to mold ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right, into
Mm-hmm.
the next version of who we need to become in order to pull off our goals? And that's not sexy. That's not a system, right? You just can't stroke a check and buy it.
Right.
You got to design it and you got to live it. And that's
Mm.
uncomfortable for a vast majority of human beings.
Yeah.
But that's the way the game is played, and the man or woman gets there first, the
Mm-hmm.
bank account follows behind it. And I know this works because we've done it. And that's how you get there. It's not a system thing, it's an identity thing.
Right. So in other words, is it kind of like an evolution of personal traits when you say identity? I wonder if you could just kind of expand that on that a bit.
Yeah, most human beings tend to live in the past. So in other
Mm-hmm.
words, they look backwards and they live there. And in our space, it's normally not a good place where we think about our past failures, our past
Mm-hmm.
rejections. Very few people wake up celebrating, right, the way they need to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you live in the past, it's like the old saying, like if you're trying to drive forward and looking in the rearview mirror, bad things can happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
think first thing you have to do is you got to look at your past, and I'll share a very personal story. So I've been doing
Mm-hmm.
this now 30 years. When I hit my 25th anniversary, I
Mm-hmm.
had this real kind of epiphany, come to Jesus moment, where I
Mm-hmm.
asked myself a kind of a key question, which is, okay, you've been doing this for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the way you want the next 25 years to go? And at that time I was like 50, 54, 55. And where most people are kind of thinking about calling it a career after 25 years, it's a long time to do anything.
Yes.
I said, I don't want my last 25 to define my next 25, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really think about, so what does my past mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
Because what most people will do in this game will go, I wasted all that time. I
Mm-hmm.
squandered those decades, right? I wasn't my best. And all that's going to do is disempower you and like make you not in a good place. So what I did is I
Mm-hmm.
said, you know what? I'm going to look at the last 25 and I'm going to say that was all preparation for the next 25. Like that was just my version of well paid, but practice. And all
Right.
that did is situate me for my next move, my next thing. So the first piece of this is you got to look at the past and understand that no matter where you are, you learned, you got experience,
Right.
you got reps, right?
Right.
Even though you may not have accomplished what you set out to do, it doesn't mean your game's over. That's the first thing, right? So the first
Mm-hmm.
thing, identity is to frame the past. The second piece of
Right.
identity is understanding who you need to become. You are who
Right.
you are today. And this is what most people do. And I saw this vividly this past business planning cycle where I have clients do 10-year, 3-year, 1 year. We kind of file a little bit like an EOS model to be
Right.
congruent with it. And
Right.
so if I've got a client doing, let's say, $1 million this year, like last year,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and their 10-year vision is $5 million top line, right? Or maybe higher.
Mm-hmm.
What the fatal flaw human beings make, forget advisors,
Mm-hmm.
is they look at their tenure, but they filter it through their current version of who they are. And the
Mm-hmm.
brain goes, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you say to yourself, hey, I don't need to worry about that right now. What I've got to figure out is who I need to become to get that done. Uh,
Right.
I said this in a kind of a just tongue in cheek, but it really resonated with people. I said, your current self will never solve future self problems. It's not capable of doing it. But
Right.
yet we try to have it solved and then we get frustrated. Oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if I want it. And so, in other words, we talk ourselves out of our future and we'll stay in our present because we know it. It's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, right? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
limiting, but it's comfortable nevertheless, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's part of it is understanding that who you're going to be tomorrow is not who you are today, especially if you do it with intention. So that's the first thing of
Right.
identity. The next
Right.
piece is standards. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you expect out of yourself? Like, what are your standards? Your standard, like
Mm-hmm.
who you serve, relational minimums, right? Income minimums.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in other words, somebody said, well,
Mm-hmm.
Joe, how do you elevate? A lot of times it's just by raise your standards on who you are, who you're willing to deal with, right? What your time
Right.
is worth. And as a byproduct, you end up kind of going in the direction that you want to go, right? But I think
Mm-hmm.
the key thing is 'cause I fell victim to this for a while. Never let your past define your future. Like I lived
Right.
that for a couple of years. It sucks.
Right.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody, quite frankly. Especially so that's part of it, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
identity, is raising standards. And then I think a lot of guys, and again, I use guys, I know there's women here too, obviously. If you ask me, one of the core challenges I see with most advisors who want to do great
Mm-hmm.
things but yet struggle to do it
Mm-hmm.
is there's a narrative that they have, spoken or unspoken, where they question whether they're good enough. Do they deserve
Mm.
it? Am I worthy? And that's really the truth for a lot of us, right? Because here's the bottom line. If you haven't failed out of the business yet,
Mm-hmm.
or you haven't succeeded what you wanted to accomplish, that's not a question, are you capable of that? You
Mm-hmm.
just haven't figured out how to unlock yourself to go do it yet. That's
Right.
the bottom line. And as an industry, we get diluted with, oh, we're the next marketing thing away, right? Or we're the next system away. And, we're not going to do it here. But, if you talk to advisors and say, hey, have you ever invested in a practice management thing or this thing and that thing? Most of them will say yes. I said, did it help you? Yeah, it helped me a little bit.
Right.
Very rarely going to say, oh, yeah, it gave me my big breakthrough. Like I was able to
Right.
double my business in 3 years and it totally changed how I look at things. It's a tool, right? But it's easy. It's easy to buy stuff. It's easy to acquire tools. It's much
Mm-hmm.
more challenging to do the work on yourself to
Right.
to get you to where you want to go, right? So I think that's a big gap in the industry that we don't like to talk about because it's a little nebulous, maybe a little woo-woo for some people. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, in my experiences of 30, now 31 years, it's the closest thing to the truth that I've found so far.
Yeah. So actually, it's a very positive way, number one, to look at the past, that the past is basically a learning experience, right?
Yep.
Setting you up to move forward, and that
Yep.
the power to change has to do with your own commitment to personal growth and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing where you need to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So for advisors who want to really evolve and grow, I mean, what are some of the things they really need to be focused on? One sounds like bring yourself and kind of capturing the right kind of personal identity going
Mm-hmm.
forward. But what are
Mm-hmm.
some of the things you'd recommend that an advisor who wants to grow should start to think about?
I think it's a four-part process, right? So I think the
Mm-hmm.
first thing is, okay, what's the target, right? So we talk about
Mm-hmm.
growth like in this global nebulous way. And so,
Mm-hmm.
number one, 30 seconds on goal setting as part of
Good.
this is
Mm-hmm.
that what most advisors do is they do two things and they both are wrong. Number one, they'll be very vague with their, if I can just do a little bit better than last year, I'm good, right? I don't know
Right.
what that means, right? Or they'll
Right.
say, I want to do X amount of dollars. I say, okay. And that's wrong too. And people are like, what do you mean that's
Mm-hmm.
wrong? Like, what do you mean that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the way we do things. I go, there's so many variables in the world. And the example I like to use is this. You open up your email and inside there's a message. Hey, I was referred to you by one of your clients.
Right.
That person could be a $500,000 relationship. It could be a $5 million relationship. That we just don't know
Right.
the variables, right? There's
Right.
who shows up and how much money they have. That's a variable. There's the
Right.
market variable. Do we have a good market, sideways market, down market? There's the how
Right.
much money do my clients take out variable. There's how many of my clients die this year variable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to
Mm-hmm.
sit there and say to yourself, I'm going to set a single goal that's a number and it's a pass fail is doing you a
Right.
massive disservice. So what we do is we talk about minimum acceptable, then brass ring. So, like
Right.
for example, if somebody did $750,000 last year, I'll say, well,
Right.
what do you want to do? What do you want to do this year? And they'll throw a
Mm-hmm.
number. I say, well, does that represent the minimum, the median, or the brass ring? We need to
Right.
clarify that. So,
Right.
they may say, hey, at a minimum, I want to do 800,000. My top line would be $1 million. And what's funny
Mm-hmm.
about that, they won't write a million. They'll write like 985,000 because mentally they
Hmm.
can't put the extra digit on the back end of that thing. It's a weird thing. I've seen that for
Interesting.
many decades. So then I'll go to them. I'll say, okay, what number are you focused on every morning? Are you looking at the 850 number, or are you looking at the $1 million number? Because that matters, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
brain, we all have to remember this. Our brains are massive problem-solving vehicles. So if
Mm-hmm.
I ask it to solve the $850,000 problem, it will solve it for me, but it won't solve the
Right.
$1 million problem because I'm not asking it to, right?
Right.
So that's part of it. So number one, be very precise with your goals in the range. That's number one. Hi, Coach Joe Lucas here, and I'm just breaking here for a moment just to do a couple quick reminders. Number one, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast. In addition, please leave a comment or a review. Those things really, really matter. And share this episode with 3 of your colleagues inside the financial services space. And lastly, make sure that you go ahead and claim your free membership inside of Magellan Network. Now back to this week's episode.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, and this is massive, why? So if somebody says to me, oh yeah, I want to do $1 million, I say, great, why is it a must? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you can't sell me on why it's a must to you, you haven't sold it on yourself why it's a must to you. And
Right.
I call that the pull. There's push and pull. The push
Mm-hmm.
is motivation, effort, right? Discipline, sucking it up. And that's great. And we all need that. But it's
Right.
fleeting. It's when you have it, it's great. But there are some days you just don't have it. All right. The
Right.
pull, which is 10 times stronger, is the why, is the mission, is the commitment. It's doing things when you don't want to do them. That's got
Right.
nothing to do with motivation. That's everything to do with commitment, right? And this is what drives me crazy. A lot of people will confuse me. Oh, Joe, you're like one of these motivation coaches. And I always, quite frankly, piss me off because I don't do motivation because that's like sunburn. It's fleeting. I'm about
Mm-hmm.
strategies and about pull and about getting you committed to what you want.
Right.
So the why. Next, the
Mm-hmm.
who. Who do you need to become to pull this off? Because it
Mm-hmm.
can't be the current version of you. Because if the current version you could have pulled it off, it would have already pulled it off, right?
Right.
And then the last one is how we're going to do it, right? Or the what we're going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
The what. Most advisors, here's what they do. Here's my goal. Here's what I'm going to do. They don't look in the
Mm-hmm.
middle. The why and the who, right?
Right.
And
Right.
these are 80% of the power in doing the process. And that's why, like, even, I go back decades, sales managers, right? Hey, what are you going to do next year? Everything was on a spreadsheet. How much production are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
There's no thought. And that's why a lot of advisors got turned off to doing business plans and
Mm-hmm.
goals is because they lack the emotional meaning. It's just a bunch of numbers. A bunch of numbers is not going to get you up in the morning when you don't want to get up to go to play the game. It's just not, right?
Right.
So when we're setting frames up, on
Mm-hmm.
what we're going to accomplish, that's my questioning. All right, why is this the must? Who do you need to become the how we're going to do it's easy. In my entire career, I can take anybody's what they want and map it out. How many new clients do we need? AUM, like those are math problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
The juice is the why you want it and then the who you need to become to go get it, right? That's the
Right.
juice.
I guess who you need to become, that's like where commitment comes in, right? Because you're not like a novelist that's waiting to be inspired to generate, to write a great book. You're someone like Jerry
Mhm.
Seinfeld who has X number of hours every day, whether he's in the mood or not.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
commitment. That's got nothing to do with motivation, right? A
right.
lot of those days he's not motivated to write, right? He's
That's
committed to
right.
writing. Different, right? From
Exactly.
that perspective.
Ex-
And I think that's where a lot of times, we get caught up and we think that this game is all about sunshine and motivation and being inspired. And trust me, they're all good things. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, there's nothing wrong with being motivated out of fear. Well, why can that be?
Mm-hmm.
I am more motivated. My biggest fear, and I'll share this with everybody to give context.
Uh-huh.
My biggest fear in my world is when my game is over and I look back at my life And I call it the
Mhm.
rocking chair test. I
Mhm.
visualize this. I'm on a porch, I'm sitting
Mhm.
back, I'm still breathing, right? And I'm
Right.
looking back at my career and I'm looking back
Mhm.
at all the things that it could have been, but yet it
Right.
wasn't. That freaks
Right.
me out. So my inspiration is more about avoiding a negative outcome than the
Mhm.
pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And that's what works for me, right? So as long as it's not debilitating, and for me, it's not. It's like the opposite. It's like gets me like, I
Mhm.
gotta go.
Mhm.
I think that's really crucial. Most advisors don't understand that this is mostly a psychological game, not a game of
Mhm.
designations, not a game of like at the end of the day, like I said earlier, your bank
Mhm.
account is a reflection of who you are. So, like who you are today equates bank account. Who you need to
Mhm.
become tomorrow will equate bank account. If you're
Mhm.
not willing to evolve, then why would you expect your bank account to evolve? And I'm not saying it won't move here or there, but I watch people in their 50s and 60s like literally double their business on the backside of their career because they finally figured it out, right?
Right.
Like it all clicked in finally, right? And
Mhm.
that's beautiful. And then there are people I talk to that get referred to me, and I just had one a couple months ago. Like, Joe, I'm
Mhm.
63 years old. I want to do this for another 10 years. You can't teach this old dog new tricks. I go,
Hmm.
you're right. Because if you believe you're the dog and you don't learn, like, yeah, what would you like me to do with this, right? And it was a
Right.
nice conversation. It was a heartful conversation. And I think he kind
Mhm.
of went off. I spoke the truth. He didn't like it. But it's funny, like a couple of weeks ago, he reached back out to me. He said, look, I've been giving a lot of thought to what you said.
Mhm.
And I realized that you can't teach an old dog a trick. I said, that's right. I said, you
Right.
gave up on you. Nobody else did.
Mhm.
We as human beings seek comfort, we seek certainty. And so we'll create these narratives in our minds that kind of keep us safe. I call it caveman thinking, basically, right?
Mhm.
Except there's no more
Mhm.
saber-toothed tigers or anything out there.
Mm.
But if you think about it, it holds us back. And how does it hold us back? Simple stuff. Like most of you guys here, and I know some of you, so I know your businesses to a certain degree.
Mhm.
Like, why aren't you 100% referral centric?
Mhm.
Why aren't we getting all the assets from our clients? Why do we care what other people think? Right?
Mhm.
Because we're afraid that, oh man, what other people may think, or I don't want to be perceived as a salesperson. Like they put all these
Mhm.
narratives in their head to keep themselves
Mhm.
safe. And what they don't realize is that's what holds you back. The people that make, and I'll just use an example, because I work with some of these, and I'll share this. The people that are
Mhm.
on like the Barron's list and all this other jazz, trust me,
Mhm.
anybody here, and I mean this sincerely, they're not any smarter than you. What
Mhm.
they figured out is how to channel this at a higher level and to evolve into something, right? That's it. That's the bottom line. And I see this over and over again. In our space, intellect is important. So I'm not going to say it doesn't mean anything. But as an
Mhm.
industry, we tend to overvalue it, it's overweighted where the
Mhm.
emotional aspect of it, you mastering you,
Mhm.
is woefully undervalued. And that's the difference, right?
Right.
You just can't solve it with stroking a check. That's the problem.
Right. So the key challenge is really an internal challenge in terms of adopting the right attitudes. And I can see where having a mental image that one day I'm going to be sitting in a rocking chair on my porch. I'm going to look back on my career. And
Mhm,
I'm going to feel was it also ran. I'm really not going
mhm.
to be happy or satisfied, rather. I can
Right.
see that as being a very a motivating image. I wasn't the best that I could be, and
Right.
I don't have another
Exactly.
shot.
That's right. Unless you believe in like reincarnation and another life, maybe you come back. That's what gets me up in the
Right.
morning is avoiding that scene, right? And I use that as
Hmm.
fuel
Yeah.
to really do what I need to do. So, call it whatever you want to call it, negative motivation, negative inspiration. I don't care. I just
Mhm.
know it works for me going forward. And that's really what's critical.
Yeah, well, it's a type of visualization, but I guess it's a very motivating image saying, gee, I want to work very hard. I'll take a slightly nicer vacation because I'll make more. Like, so what?
So one of the other things I think is really important about, getting back to doubling your business, right, is
Uh-huh.
that understand that the pace of growth is going to be 100% tied to your ability to be uncomfortable in this game. So if
Mm-hmm.
you think
Right.
about, there's no free lunch here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can all go back to, that's why I say our past is valuable to us if we look at it in the right context, right? Like there was
Mm-hmm.
a time, and everybody's here, and I know some of the people here that you didn't even know what a financial plan was. Like you didn't even have your license yet, right? And like you didn't have client one. And so you're totally had no capabilities, no confidence, quite frankly, no competence, but yet you're here years later because you pulled it off, right? So if
Right.
anything, that should give you solace and confidence that if you pulled that off in your past, you're capable of pulling off your big future game because you're
Hmm.
better at it because you've had experience doing it, right? And I think that's really important. And the goal here of this game, and I know, like I said, some people here, unless you really, really are desired to, like never retire. Like that's
Hmm.
my mantra. And I think some of you guys know this. Like, why
Hmm.
would you want to retire if you can play the game? We're not airlines pilot. We're not airline pilots. We don't have a mandatory anything. You know, I always say in my world, your last year is your best year.
Hmm.
Like, there's no mountain here. A lot of people think, oh man, once I get, and we all played this game in our career. Once I get to this income level, man, I'm good. Then you get there. Huh. It's not so much, it's not so much basically, it's not enough. And the next. So what I've realized is if you ever feel like you got to the tip of the mountain, it's a bad thing. That means you're not climbing the biggest mountain you can, right? So
Right.
I think you always want to be focused on playing a game and not just expand to make more money. Money's just a resource, right? But I
Hmm.
think what a lot of advisors do is like human nature is they get to a
Hmm.
certain place and it's a dangerous place called the comfort zone where they're
Right.
making enough money, take the PKs, the kids are good, maybe they're out of the house by now. And you're kind of in this place and you kind of lose your why. Like, what's next? And I think that's a dangerous place because a lot of muscles then start to atrophy, mental muscles, emotional muscles.
Hmm.
And you start feeling like the backslide. That's why I never accept when somebody says to me, Joe, I just want to do what I did last year. It's the wrong answer. I don't
Right.
accept that, right? Grow.
Right.
It's all saying grow or die, and I mean that. I don't
Right.
care if you take the money and burn it in the backyard. I don't care, but we're going to grow. That's the mantra here,
Right.
right?
Well, one question is that I see here, which I think you've partially answered, which is, how do you know if you're an advisor? How do you define success? I mean, because part of what you're saying is just growing I know growing in and of itself
Yeah.
is a very happiness generating activity. But when you look at
Mhm.
advisors and when you coach advisors, how do you help them define success?
We have a very cool game, and here's
Uh-huh.
what I'll say: show me another business, another profession that you can have both time freedom and economic abundance. Show me another
Hmm.
profession. It doesn't exist. I've
Right.
looked.
Right.
So now, does that mean that everybody gets it? No, because you have to set the game up to win that game, right? It's a different game.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
to me, if I had to put a label on success, it's number one, it's really those two things, economic abundance and time freedom, which is you're making more than enough
Hmm.
money to live your life the way you want to. You're giving away money to charity and your passions, right? From
Right.
that perspective, you're spending time with your family, you're going on your trips to vacation, you're totally sustainable. You almost feel semi-retired. You're kind of, doing things like
Hmm.
that. And not saying that like this is not all sunshine and roses. There's always issues. It's called compliance. We know that.
Hmm.
But you love your game and you never want to quit it because it gives you the two things you want most. And look,
Right.
most people got in this game, if you really were to interview them, hey, why'd you become an advisor? Freedom. I don't want to work for a
Right.
boss. I want to have control. And
Right.
yet a lot of advisors never realize that freedom because they build their business around just effort all the time and they create it's a well-paying job, but it's a job. It feels like a job, right? It feels like that.
Hmm.
I've always said this is the worst paying job you can have or the best business you can ever own. But it's two different things, right?
Right.
And a lot of advisors default into, and I think in a career cycle, I think the first 5 years is all about hard work and effort and energy and getting kicked and getting up. And you have to put your time in.
Hmm.
There's no shortcut there.
Hmm.
But a lot of advisors stay there the entire career where they're every year it's a startup for them. Like they're like,
Hmm.
30 years later, they're still like trying to figure out how to get to 300,000 or trying to do this. Like
Right.
you've had a quarter decade, a quarter century, excuse me, to figure out this game and you never evolved. You're approaching it like you did 30 years ago, and that's why it's not working. And unfortunately, there are a lot of advisors who, it's going to be what it is, are going to end their careers and they're going to be in their version of the rocking chair and they're not going to like what
Hmm.
they see. There's not,
Right.
unfortunately.
What's your view of the 80-20 rule?
I think Pareto's law is a real thing. I don't think it's some hypothetical weird thing. And I think it's different in a cycle, right? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, I have this kind of, I'll call philosophy, like a better word. Like every advisor starts out, they have three identities: the advisor identity, the business owner
Mm-hmm.
identity, and the entrepreneur identity, right? And I don't care what your
Mm-hmm.
business card says, you have those three identities. And what happens is that when you begin, you're really the advisor. Right? I got to make it happen and stuff like that. But as you
Mm-hmm.
grow and build your business out, now you take on more business owner tendencies, you take on more entrepreneurial identity, if you will. And what happens is what's 80/20, like the first 5 years, what's the 20% that drives 80% of our results? Marketing, business development, right? That's where we've got to spend
Mm-hmm.
our time. And then
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we evolve. We're still doing business development, but now it's different, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
your 80/20 is always going to be shifting as you go throughout your entire career. And just as a simple rule, there's only two kinds of things we do in this business: things that make us money and then everything else. That's it. Very binary, right? And I think a lot of advisors are masters of their 80%. What's 80%? Watching CNBC, like that's going to make a difference in your world. Reading the internet, like that's going to make a difference. Like, oh, I got to be up on the news. Oh, are you a hedge fund manager? I didn't know that. Good to know, right? And like they use these distractions as the illusion of productivity,
Right.
where
Right.
what's their 20%? Talk to your clients, make sure they're happy, follow up on your prospects, right? Check in with your
Mm-hmm.
COIs. I mean, those are the 20% activities that will yield you the results. Which one's more comfortable? Surfing the internet, watching TV is way more comfortable for human beings than getting on the
Absolutely.
phone and calling somebody or sending an email or video or something like that. And that's what happens, right? So, how advisors, what I call check out of the game and still remain
Mm-hmm.
in their office, is that's what
Right.
they do. They surf the internet, they do stuff like that. It's all they call it sometimes research,
Right.
BS, just doing busy work to have the illusion of
Right.
something.
Yeah.
And because they're not compelled, they have low physical, mental, emotional energy,
Mm-hmm.
and they've not set themselves up to win the day. The morning sucks. They start the day wrong, and they wonder why they're just doing okay. Well,
Yeah.
because that's all you expect, because that's what you set yourself for. And when I say mediocrity, just so we're on the same page here, mediocrity is still making six figures a year. That's what's beautiful about this
Mm-hmm.
game. You could be
Mm-hmm.
pretty mediocre, and I just with utmost respect. You could be a
Mm-hmm.
pretty mediocre player and still make 100, 150, 200,000, $250,000 a year in this game. It's that powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But imagine if you harness that power and got super functional, it's seven figures. That's the difference between a six-figure person and a seven-figure person. Is really, it's about identity, standards, and how they play. That's it. It's not about intellect. It's not about the Rolodex. It's got nothing to do with that long term. It's really
Right.
got to do everything with what they're going to do, right? And how they want to
Right.
approach
So it's actually kind of what you really discussed, being committed to doing the right things, whether they're fun or not. It's a lot easier to say I'm a brilliant analyst. I have to watch, I got to stare at the screen and,
it. Yep.
figure this and figure this out.
Sure. Sure.
And
100%.
I remember when I was starting out as a recruiter, it was a guy that I used to talk to many years ago. But that's the reason he washed out of the business. He was always looking at patterns on his
Yeah.
desktop and how they were
Yeah.
changing, but he didn't do anything. He didn't talk to his clients enough. Let's start one action tomorrow or after this
Hmm.
webinar
Yeah.
to really help me grow my business.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
It's not going to be what you think. So here's what I'm going to tell you: control the first hour of the morning. If you don't have your morning ritual dialed in, you don't control the first hour of the day, you're not going to control the day. It's irrelevant. Best laid plans of mice and men, done.
Hmm.
So foundational. Own the morning. You own the
Hmm.
morning, you control the day. You don't own the morning, you don't control your day. What does owning the morning mean?
Hmm.
Here's what it doesn't mean. It does not mean you start the day with the news. It does not mean you start the day with email. Those are other people's priorities and other people's problems. You
Hmm.
want to start your day getting you ready to go execute at a high level. And I won't get into all the
Hmm.
protocols. If you go on my YouTube channel, there are videos about morning rituals and how to get that done and what really works for advisors and things like that.
Sounds like it's making sure you execute on what's
Hmm.
important to you to
Yep.
grow your business. And that's really what you have to be committed to, not
Yep.
being distracted and giving yourself the illusion of working hard. So, Joe, I want to thank you again very much for being here and wish everybody a great rest of the day. But no, this had a lot of really good insights for me and I thank you very much, Joe.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Magellan Network Show. Hey, if any of this resonated with you, I invite you to come to MagellanNetwork.net, and we have a powerful group coaching community of like-minded advisors. Come in for a trial. You and I will have a one-on-one conversation. Let's see if I can help elevate your game, both personally and professionally.